Hello and welcome to Sacred Mindshift Circle. I'm your host, Dahlia Deborah Donalds. And today we have a very special guest joining us, Jane Rogers, author of Laughing Through the Storm, Life with Epilepsy, Unpredictable and Unexpectedly Funny. Throughout history, epilepsy has been surrounded by misunderstanding, fear, and misconceptions. Across many centuries and cultures, seizures were often interpreted as something supernatural or spiritual, and some believed that individuals experiencing seizures were possessed by spirits, while others viewed the condition as a sign of divine intervention or punishment. In ancient Greece, epilepsy was known as the sacred disease because many people believed it originated from the gods. During the Middle Ages in Europe, individuals living with epilepsy were sometimes feared, isolated, or stigmatized because their condition was not understood. Today, medical science recognizes epilepsy as a neurological disorder caused by abnormal electrical activity in the brain. Yet, despite the advances in knowledge and treatment, many misconceptions still exist, and people living with epilepsy often face challenges that go beyond the condition itself. Our guest today has spent much of her life navigating those challenges. Diagnosed with epilepsy as a young teenager, she has experienced firsthand the unpredictability and struggles that come with living with the condition. Through her book, she shares her journey with honesty, resilience, and humor, helping to raise awareness while encouraging others who may be facing their own storms in life. Thank you and welcome so much, Jane, for participating in the podcast and being here with me today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
So let's begin from your childhood. Take us back. What was life like before epilepsy entered into the picture? Was it something that started quite early or later on when you were a teenager?
So epilepsy started basically, I started getting sick when I was 12 and then diagnosed at 13. Um, I don't really remember a time like what it felt like to not have the migraines and the constant problems with the epilepsy. But I grew up in the East Coast in Riverview, New Brunswick, with my parents. My mom and my dad was a vet. My mom was a stay-at-home mother at the time, and I had two older brothers. Um, our family dynamic was really full of love. So I had a really good upbringing with the support and love in the house and spending time together. So I had a very good footing for when the storm started at 13, when things kind of started to go southward. But I grew up, yeah. But when I was 8 years old, we moved over to Ottawa, Canada, and because my father got a job in the government over there. And for a few years I was fine, but then when I was 13, when I was 12, I started to get sick every month for a week at a time, and we didn't know what was going on. Um, but it was the hormones that pretty much, like puberty, is what triggered the seizures. And so it took about, I don't know if it was 3 or 4 months before finally figuring out what was going on. It happened basically at March break. My we Our family friends came over for a visit, and us kids had a sleepover in the basement. And the youngest, he saw me have a seizure in the middle of the night. The next morning at the breakfast table, he casually said to me, "Oh, Jane, you were shaking like crazy last night." So I was like, "What?" But my parents were like, very concerned when they heard that. And so, of course, they took me to the doctor right away, as soon as we could get me in. And after, some testing, it was confirmed that I was suffering from epilepsy, and I was having grand mal seizures in my sleep. Only once a month at that time, right before my period would start. And yeah, so um that was the beginning of it all, yeah.
Yeah, so in your case, it was something that occurred with your entrance into adolescence and the hormones. And
Yes.
you made a point that your friend saw you having the seizure, but you didn't recall it. So you don't really remember as much of the details, or do you know?
No, that's the thing. That's the thing. Like, I mean, before that, like, I mean, I remember, okay, so when we were at the point where we had no idea what was going on with me, I remember waking up in the morning just feeling like I got hit by a bus and just exhausted and just so I was really struggling and I wouldn't be able to go to school for the week because I was vomiting repeatedly until I was dry heaving, and then the migraines were brutal. So we were trying to figure out what was up with me. And then, of course, it would settle down. I'd go back to school, and we thought, okay, maybe it was a bug. But then it happened another time, then another time, and then once, luckily, my friend saw me have that seizure in the middle of the night. Then it was like, well, it was like obvious. Then, well, we knew that it was a serious medical condition, and I was diagnosed then. I had no idea at that time what epilepsy was. I really didn't know what I was getting into, what was coming for me. Um, so yeah, I unfortunately I trusted the wrong people to be telling them that I was diagnosed with this, but I didn't, again, I was just a kid. I didn't know that, like, I mean, if I share something like this, I could put a target on my back, and which it ended up doing, because I ended up getting bullied very severely in junior high. And once I was put on my first medication called Tegretol, it had an unwelcomed side effect of weight gain. So that as well put another layer on the bullying, because then they were calling me fat and stupid and weird and ugly and all this stuff, all the hurtful words that no one wants to hear, especially at that age. So yeah, I had to deal with that. And so once that started, I realized I was like, okay, I cannot be, I have to keep my mouth shut and just, keep my head down and try to get through this. Which, I luckily had a couple of friends that stayed with me and that didn't, not because they felt sorry for me, we had a connection because they were also going through some things. So I was fortunate to have them because they really helped me get through that time because those 2 years was brutal. Mhm.
So I would say that that's when you really started to notice more or less that you had to, as you said, be careful who you told and that you weren't exactly like the other children.
Yeah.
What was the reaction of your parents when they received the information from the doctor that you had epilepsy? How did they take it?
Well, I mean, I can't exactly remember what they were thinking at the time, but I know that the minute they would have gotten that news, they were trying to do as much research as possible and doing everything they could to um, get me better. And doing everything that the doctors were telling them to do, like writing, like taking tons of notes, any kind of weird behavior that I was doing or anything, they would take a note of it because they were like, maybe that's a trigger for a potential seizure that night. Just all those things. So they were really, they tried to stay calm around me and didn't show their emotions around me. And, I'm sure once they went to bed at night, they were talking about it and worried and scared and so on and so forth, but they didn't, um, you know, I didn't see it around, they didn't make me aware of that at that time because they were trying to protect me and trying to make me think that like everything's gonna be fine, don't worry about it, it's all good, we got it under control, that kind of thing. But at that age I don't blame them because they I was a kid and I really didn't understand what was going on and they didn't want to scare me, because of the seriousness of this disease.
And speaking of that, how did you take it? Because obviously, the same way that they were worried about triggers and trying to figure out what it was that could make it go off, how did you feel anytime then that you had to go out or you were in school or that you knew that you were not going to be around your parents or at home?
Yeah, so at that time, I was again like I was just really kind of starting to, I had to start to learn to pay attention to everything that was going on with me internally because since it was especially that I was having them only when I was sleeping, the doctors wanted to find out, okay, did you feel weird at this time? Like, what were you feeling? Did you dream something or anything? So that was my um, job to be able to go to the doctors and tell them exactly what I felt after that seizure. But for a while there, I was struggling with that because I would not wake up before the seizure would happen. I would still stay fully asleep, but I do remember I was basically having nightmares. So it was very much in the temporal side of the brain where, the dreams and stuff go on there. And I would hear like a creepy female voice and then just like eerie sounds and then kind of flashing lights. So I remembered that. But yeah, it took a bit for me to really be able to give them that good information because again, like, I mean, with my seizures, I was just sleeping through the whole thing. So I'm trying to remember back, okay, when did it happen? Do I remember any kind of dream or anything that was going on? So it took some work to get to that, but it just, you really with this disease, you really have to be very hyper vigilant on any kind of triggers that happen or some sort of chemical imbalance that's going on in that day. You just have to be aware so that you can kind of find certain patterns that might be a cause of another seizure or whatever, which I've learned over time. But at first it was tough. But once I started to remember some of those dreams that I was having, then the doctors were able to kind of help me a little further.
And at any time, did it cause you any fear? Although, even though you know that most of the time, you slept through it and you were having nightmares, did you ever have any fear that like something else could happen while you were having the seizure? A lot of times, for example, we hear like when someone's having a seizure, they can bite their tongue or certain things
Mhm.
can happen depending on the type of seizure. Were your seizures mild enough that it wasn't too bad or like of a concern?
Well, at first it was there was no concern. I've never bit my tongue, never done anything like that. But in my 20s, when I was 21, I dislocated my shoulder for the first time during a seizure. So that became the start of being scared about every single time I'd have a seizure because um, it basically I dislocated my shoulder 75 times in a year and a half. Um, every single time after a seizure, my seizure pattern was at that point was once a week. And of course, once my socket started to stretch out, it would fall out when I was dressing myself. My mother had to help dressing me. Like, I mean, my independence just dwindled down, but I became more fearful when I'd have those seizures because I was like, oh God, not another one. It will pop out on me this time. But it it took, like, the doctors weren't listening to us at that time. They want they only think of people who are fit in a box, and I was not one of those people. So they were like, "Oh, we want her to heal naturally," but we were like, "She's having like I'm having them every week. This I need a surgery because my shoulder will not heal before I have another one." but it took, yeah, 75 dislocations. My dad had to learn how to put my shoulder back in himself so he wouldn't have to go to the hospital so many times. But there was one night where my father couldn't put it back in, and so we had to go there. And then the doctor looked at my chart, which was the size of a phone book at that point, and he was like, "Oh boy, okay, so we're giving you medication that we would give a 300-pound linebacker." And I was 150 pounds. So he's like, "This is getting dangerous." I'm like, "Yeah, well, yeah, we've been trying to tell you." Um, and he was like, can I try to put it back in without any medications?" And I was like, "Are you kidding me right now?" But I was like, I was like, "You know what? Like, I'm just gonna sure try it, you know." And when he started to try to put it back in, I screamed out, like bellowed in pain, and I said, "Give me the drugs," you know. So he was like, "Okay, we have to bring you in for surgery." I'm like, "Well, thank you for once listening to us." But after that time in my life, I am st to this day, even though I have bolts in my shoulder, I'm still always worried it's gonna pop out again because who knows, the bolts could wear out, and so I have that fear in my mind now of that kind of thing, which is not which is not good, like that kind of trauma has caused that, and unfortunately. But at least early on in my life, at the beginning, I wasn't fearful.
Now comes the part that I think is very interesting as far as going to school with this condition. Me,
Mhm.
myself, as an educator, I know that I've had students, I've never had a student who actually suffered from epilepsy. I've had students who were diabetic, and I'd have to learn to use the EpiPen.
Yeah.
What was the, I guess, support system like in the schools, from the teachers, from the administration? Were they educated in how to deal with this? Did you feel that, like, if something were to happen, that they could help you? What was that like?
Well, since at that time I was only having them when I was sleeping, they didn't really have to educate themselves on what to do if I had a seizure in the classroom. But they were fully aware of, the fact that I was an epileptic, and that um, with me taking the medication now, I was having a hard time with my schoolwork. So they were a lot more lenient with me and being more helpful in that regard. They were also forgiving with my absences. They understood that kind of thing. And, I got the extra help with them as well, extra time to do my assignments and or tests and stuff and exams, that kind of thing, which I'm very grateful for because with all the medication I was on, it just clouded the brain, and had already I was diagnosed with a learning disability, so it was a little slower uh, as well. So, I needed that grace from the teachers, and luckily they were very supportive and helpful in that regard. Yeah.
And as far as, like, again, you playing certain sports or doing certain activities,
Hmm.
did you ever feel like there were things that you couldn't do, or that you were worried about doing, to, like, I guess, agitate yourself when you were at school or in the daytime?
You know what? There were never anything that I wasn't able to do uh, with that. Like, I mean, at that time, I was still. It was only a year or so into being diagnosed, so I didn't have as many problems that I do now with coordination and so forth. Uh, so I was lucky in that regard. Like I played. I played soccer in high school. I was on the field hockey team. I was, doing a track and field, that kind of stuff. I was fortunate in that regard. But later on in life, the coordination isn't as great. But early on, luckily, I was still capable of doing all those things. And I honestly didn't even realize that I shouldn't be in water without any supervision. I never knew that until later on. I was like, oh, really? I'm like, well, okay, I guess that kind of makes sense. But, I didn't have that fear of getting in because I was a water baby. Like, I loved being in the water all the time. So, um, there was never any fear around that sort of thing. So I definitely don't feel I'm missed out in that regard there. Of course, I missed out in, when it came to driving, but that's a whole nother story.
Yeah, and I mean that goes into the second idea. When is it to say that people who have epilepsy can't swim? No, because you actually were able to do, and fortunately nothing happened. But tell me overall, what are, in your opinion, some myths about epilepsy that still exist today? Like, do you see that there are certain things that people might tell you or might
Yeah.
ask you because
Yeah.
yeah, they're not aware?
Well, I mean, some people always ask me if, well, they say, like, have you ever choked on your own tongue and that kind of thing, and like that's a complete myth. Like, that's it's not never gonna happen. Like, we're not gonna, and I always tell them, please don't put anything in my mouth. Like, it's gonna, I could easily choke on that. Like, it's not gonna help at all. So stop. Just get that out of your head. Don't do that. Um, and of course, the epilepsy isn't an intellectual disability. Like, I mean, there's many very people who are in high-powered positions who are epileptics, that are teachers, that are um, politicians doing this, all over, all doctors, nurses, who knows? But and I'm just saying that, like, there's many people who have who have done really great careers and gone somewhere in life that have epilepsy, but they may be controlled and stuff, but it's not an intellectual disability. So there are some cases where some of us, do have some learning disabilities on top of it, but such as myself. But I'm still quite capable of doing things. It just takes a little longer for me to learn because of that. But it doesn't mean I can't. Yeah. So those are two definitely big myths on that regard. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think like I've said, I the only time I've actually, and I don't think I actually like witnessed it, but I remember I had a teacher when I was in junior high school, and I remember I think we were on a field trip like to the bowling alley, and he was a math teacher, so he was very smart. And he just had like a maybe 2 minute seizure where he I don't know if he laid down, or sometimes some people feel it coming on,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and then that was it, and that was like my first time actually like even understanding what this disease was, what it was about. um
Yeah.
as far as you yourself now as an adult, because you said when you were younger, of course, the way kids are, you don't really speak about it. Now as an adult, when you have to work, when you have to be in the workplace, have you ever felt any kind of discrimination or experienced any kind of stigma because of this condition?
Well, yes, so it was in my 20s. I was working at Zellers, and I got there was like a few times that I was dealing with that sort of thing. And this at one point I was like, okay, I have to stand up for myself, and just so, and it was one of the managers. And so I went up to him one day, and I, in a professional manner, not like, going at him hard, but a professional manner, saying, excuse me, do you understand how you're speaking to me right now? And I said, like, you're talking down to me like I'm a child. I don't appreciate the fact that you're treating me this way, and I'd like it if you would please stop doing that moving forward. And he was completely shocked and just mortified about his behavior, because he really didn't well, at least that's what he said. He didn't realize what he was doing at all. And generally speaking, a lot of people don't realize what they're doing. They just need to be told, hey, this is what you're doing right now. Can you please stop? And then they moving forward, they stop doing that because they realize, oh my God, what have I been doing? Like I had no idea. And that was the case for him. And once I did that, it's just like I gained his respect because I stood up to him and it said something because I was getting fed up with that sort of thing, especially at that time because when people would find out about my condition and what was going on with me, I was okay. So I was an epileptic. I was working just at a retail job at that point. I was not successful with um, going into college. I tried it twice, failed each time. I had to drop out because of the stress levels. They increased my seizures, and it was a nightmare. So there was that, and then like I was still living at home. So people just looked at that and they were like, oh, well, looking down at me. So it was very frustrating. Or so many times where I wanted to say something, but I chickened out. But that time I was like, okay, enough is enough. This isn't my workplace. I got to say something and stand up for myself because maybe he just doesn't realize what he's doing. And that was the case. Yeah.
And I know you said that normally you try to take precautions and all this when you
Mm.
feel it coming on, you try to avoid stress. What does a seizure actually feel like for you? Like, how would you describe the sensation before it's going to happen, if you have an idea it's going to happen?
Okay, well, I could tell you, okay, before my surgeries, when I'd have the daytime seizures, it felt like okay, it was starting from the pit of my stomach and it rose up to my head, and then I knew right then I had to sit down because I was going to be going into the seizure. So it was just like a pit in the stomach just rising up, and then it goes into the seizure. And it's just I would always feel completely panicked. Well, I always still do. Technically, panicked about it starting, and so that was the feeling of it. Now, after the brain surgeries, it is interesting. Instead of it starting from the pit of my stomach, it just basically feels like there's like a wave that washes over my brain, and it starts right from then. And it's like almost like I feel like a light bulb just it switches on, and then in my brain, I know it snaps, and then I'm like, uh-oh, and then I know it's coming on. So it's yeah, it's things over time that we've learned to notice any kind of weird feelings that are triggers for the starts of seizures. But that's what they've been like with when it starts.
And in your case, for example, you had the surgeries and then now you take medication, or do you have a dog? I know I've seen this thing where the
Yeah.
dogs can sit, like I've seen that. I just thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
They can sense certain things. Do
Yes.
you have what is your daily kind of routine, or what I'm not like as far as treatment is concerned to keep it
Yeah.
under control?
Yeah. So unfortunately for me, I am one of the 20 or 30% of people who do not react well with standard epilepsy medications. I am on a bunch of them, but they basically just kind of keep me from having them like every hour, basically of every day. Um, and but right now, I've been seeing another doctor, and he thinks very differently. We're looking at the mitochondria side of things, so he's put me on a bunch of different types of vitamins and creatine. So I'm working on that and seeing if things are improving in that regard, which they are. I've found some patterns that I seem to be like when there's high energy and excitability around me, it activates my brain a lot more quicker, and it just doesn't want to calm down. So that causes seizures. So I have to be kind of in a calm state and not being around um, people that are going to be like triggering that or asking them to not, just I'm. It's we've anyways, it's a pattern has emerged in that, so we're looking into that kind of thing to try to alleviate that sort of thing. And what else was I going to say? And then you said, okay. And so with dogs, actually, I've always had Chihuahuas, and my first rescue Chihuahua, well, all of them basically, without being trained, they know when I'm going to have a seizure. They can smell it. Like I give off some sort of scent. So they smell it. And like my dog Junior right now, he knows like when the night before when I'm going into bed, he'll curl up beside me. And I'm like, oh God, no. He knows I'm gonna have one. So I'm like, when he's there, I'm like, oh no. As much as I like to cuddle with you, I know you're here to protect me. And but once I get into the seizure, he moves away to avoid because he knows that I could hurt him, and then he comes back. But it's interesting. They like my first Chihuahua. He at first I had no idea what was going on, but every night he would be the nights I was gonna have seizures, he would put his chin on my forehead. And I was like, oh, that's so cute, like thinking that's just a cute little thing. He's being sweet. But he would only do that on the nights that I'd have seizures, so he knew too. So, and they were never trained. They were never trained for that, but they could sense it, which is a good thing for me, Yeah.
And now, talking about your book, right? Your book is called Laughing Through the Storm. Tell me a little bit about why why you chose that title. Where did the humor come from in this experience? A lot of people would say it's a very stressful experience. It's,
Yeah.
a lot of people have mixed
Yeah.
feelings about, obviously depending on what they went through. Why would
Yeah.
you name it that title? What caused you to select that title?
Well, laughter, the humor has always been my coping mechanism. So I knew I wanted to have that throughout my book. So it just made sense for me to put laughter in the title as well, because that's truly how I've always coped. Like I'd rather laugh about these things than otherwise I'd be crying all the time. And that is not a way I want to live my life, feeling depressed all the time and down on myself. I have to look at the positives. Like sometimes seizures are better than other days, so I'm happy about that. Like I give thanks that the seizure was nice to me today and wasn't as difficult. So, you know, laughter has always been a big part of our family as well. We're all very humorous and so forth, so it just made sense for that, and the fact that it's been my coping mechanism. It's been the best tool in my tool belt this whole time, to get me through a lot of the hard times in my life. Yeah.
Can you share one bit from the book that kind of captures that idea of that unexpected side of epilepsy that maybe you kind of just took it with a chuckle and didn't take it as serious?
Okay, well, yeah, so I've had seizures in many different places over the years. And the one place that has been the most awkward is the bathroom. I'm not talking about while brushing my teeth. I'm talking about while I'm on the toilet. And the minute the seizure hits me, I'm thinking, "Are you kidding me right now? You couldn't have waited one more minute." I'm thinking, "Geez." So, so then it goes into it, and I'm holding on and praying that I'm not going to fall off of the darn toilet. But after the seizure passes and I, come to and so forth, I'm like thinking, you know what, one day I'm gonna laugh about this, because it's like, I mean, it, it's not really funny in that moment, but when you think about it later on, it's just like, well, the timing is kind of is funny because of that. So, and that definitely sums up a lot of the times of the seizures when they come unexpectedly in different places. And unfortunately, it's happened to me 3 times. And luckily, just at home. Fortunately, just at home. But yeah, that's yeah. Mhm.
And so yeah, I mean, I could just imagine. And so now when you wrote this book and you decided to publish it and everything, what would be the message that you hope someone who's newly diagnosed with epilepsy could take away from your story? I mean, obviously, mostly adults will probably read it,
Mm.
but also if you are a parent or you are a teacher and you have a child with epilepsy, what would be the message that you would want to not only give to someone who has it, but also to people who are around family members or loved ones or, children who also have it? What would you say?
Well, I'd say, I know that epilepsy is very unpredictable and it's like being on a roller coaster ride, honestly. But you always have to n never give up on hope for there to be another type of medication out there that could work for you or a type of um, surgery or anything like that. You just have to keep trying to find anything that could be helpful, even when it's sometimes it's just like you're like you've done it so many times and it's not worked, which has been my case. Sometimes it's hard to be positive in that regard, but you got to dig deep. Um, I have surprised myself many times where I'm realizing how strong I really am that I'd never given myself credit for. Being an epileptic, we tend to be labeled as weaker, but it's the opposite of that. We are strong warriors with what we have to deal with on a daily basis. And after having seizures, it's you gotta, you know, give yourself some grace and there's always hope. There's always hope. You just have to keep on trying to find something that can help you uh, out there. It's tough, but never give up hope. Trust me. I like I'm still having them frequently, almost every 2 days. So coming from me, it's you just have to keep digging and don't give up hope, and always try to look at the lighter side of things. And yeah, that's kind of my message there.
And especially as you just said, like you're still having them until, as far as you know, what is the actual, I guess age, or does it ever tone down? Is there an age that it kind of dwindles and the occurrences of having the epileptic seizures at all?
That can be for many cases, yes. There has been cases where they stop having them after, like for some females, they stop having them after had their first baby or whatever. So there is that, and that was always the hope for me. Um, Maybe it will start improving once stop my period at that point, which could be in the next 5 years or so. Um, but I don't, hopefully, but for my case, and I think that it'll be a little more of a struggle. But there is a lot of cases where yes, they stop. Like even like if the person was a baby when they started having seizures at puberty, they stop. So there is a lot of that. And luckily for a lot of people, which is wonderful because, that's everybody wants to not to have them anymore. And it does happen in many cases.
And tell us a little bit about where people can find your book, where you're selling it, or how it's being marketed.
Yeah, sure. So I have a website called laughingthroughthestorm.com. All my information is there. You could see where finding my book there as well. Like you can find it on Amazon, some other websites, and some local bookstores in my area. But it is all that information would be at laughingthroughthestorm.com. And all proceeds of my book are going to the Epilepsy Ottawa Foundation as well. And that's been a local organization that has helped me and many other epileptics in my area. So it's always been a purpose driven as project.
Well, thank you so much, Jane, for participating. And I will leave all of the links to your website and where they can find information also about the foundation in the podcast description. And yeah, and thanks so much for stopping by today. And you guys, if you enjoy these podcasts, remember to subscribe to Sacred Mindshift Circle, sacredmindshift.com, so you never miss another important event or podcast. And thank you so much, Jane.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure talking to you today.